Wouldn't it be nice that all your dividend payers will continue to increase their dividend payment and will never cut their distribution? Today, I'm going to give you 3 tricks that I use every single quarter when I review my portfolio to avoid dividend cuts. Dividend investors, bonjour. My name is Mike Ihu. I am the founder of Dividend Stocks Rocks, and I'm a passionate investor. I have this YouTube channel to help you invest with more conviction so you can enjoy your retirement. And speaking of retirement, what is more important than keeping your dividend alive, right? As you can see on this graph, if you suffer from dividend cut, it's not only about a loss of income, but it's also a loss of capital. What you see on this graph is the poor story of Macerich, a retail mall REIT in the US that has slowed down its dividend at one point and then eventually run into more complicated territories. Retail industry is not doing that great, and then pandemic happened, and when the company had to cut down its distribution, investors not only lost their income probably forever, but they also suffer a massive capital loss. So whenever there's a dividend cut, if you look back 6 or 9 months before, you can see that the market see it coming, and then you are left with basically nothing for your retirement. So here are my 3 tricks that will avoid most of dividend cuts. So the first one, kind of counterintuitive, but it's to trust the market. And then you say, Mike, trust the market? That doesn't make any sense, right? When I say trust the market, I say, especially when you are in a low interest rate environment as we were in the past 10 years, great bull market, all the economic environment was great for businesses, and yet you find companies offering you 7, 8, 10% yield. That should ring a bell. That's a huge red flag, and it usually leads to a dividend cut at one point because the market is telling you this company is struggling, they're not able to grow, and eventually they have to cut down their dividend if they want to save the business. What you see here on that graph, Chem Trade Logistic Income Fund, unfortunately was, great for retirees for several years. A lot of people were telling me, but Mike, I love the yield. And then it was rated poorly at DSR, at Dividend Stocks Rocks. And you know why? Because the company showed no growth. And actually, we thought the dividend may be at risk at one point. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and there you go. Whenever there's a recession or there's any major event that will shake the business model, you end up with what I said earlier, a loss of dividend income and also a loss of capital. My second trick is to look for an absence of dividend growth. Actually, the dividends, the absence of dividend growth by itself, it's a dividend cut in disguise. What you see on this graph is True North Commercial REIT, TNT, but it's not a bomb, showing no dividend increase since 2013. So in other words, you are losing buying power year after year. And while the inflation was around 1 and 2%, you probably thought it wasn't a big deal. Now we're talking about 5-6% a year. If it continues for a few years going forward, you're going to lose a lot of buying power. It also tells you a very clear indication that the company is not able to thrive, especially when you consider the past 10 years where everything should be in place for the business to grow and make more money and generate more income and eventually pay more in dividend. If they cannot do that during that perfect timing, what's going to happen when they hit a recession, right? So again, you put yourself at risk for a dividend cut, and in the meantime, while you enjoy a very nice yield, you're still suffering from a dividend cut in disguise due to inflation, and this is becoming a real problem. Now, before I go to my third trick to avoid dividend cut, which is probably the more important, I would like you to take a moment and go in the comment, tell me what are your tricks to avoid dividend cuts. We're going to help out the community here. Give me a thumbs up, like this video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me to grow this channel even more. So thank you for your support. And now back to my third trick to avoid dividend cuts. focus on companies with a strong dividend triangle. I've talked about the dividend triangle in the past. I even have a podcast episode on that as well. Link in the description below, obviously. The key here is the dividend triangle has three components. So revenue growth, earnings per share growth, and dividend growth. The example that I just pulled out on this graph right here is from HR REIT. Obviously for REITs, we're using FFO per share and not earnings per share, but it's pretty much the same principle. So how much the company is growing in terms of sales, do they make profit, and are they able to increase their dividend? So what you can see here is with H&R, yes, they cut their dividend during the pandemic, but they cannot really blame the pandemic for it. If you look at the past years, in 2017, 18, 19, revenue were declining, FFO per share was declining, so it is a sign of a weak dividend triangle. And on top of that, we had an absence of dividend growth during those years. So everything was pointing towards one direction, a dividend cut. What happened when they went into a bump road? Well, there you go. They cut their dividends. So it could have been easily avoided by following a strong dividend triangle. So here's an example of what we are looking at for dividend stocks rocks. One of my favorite, you know it, National Bank. But when you see it, you can see that the dividend goes up all the time. The earnings got a small slump in 2020. Then you make your research and you realize that it was due to the pandemic, but yet they were still able to overcome this difficulty and now they're thriving. Same thing for the dividend. There was a small pause. Then you do your due diligence, you make your own research, you realize regulators imposed a dividend growth freeze on all financial institutions. But besides that, before and after that, we see strong dividend growth at the same time. So if you focus on those type of companies, of course, your yield will be lower, but you're going to avoid most of dividend cuts, which means that your income is going to grow and your capital will follow as well. To end this small video, what I wanted to show you here is how we do it at Dividend Stocks Rocks. So what I think is super important, if you don't, even though you're not an M member at DSR, is to establish yourself with a clear rating on all your stocks. So look at your companies, look at their dividend triangle. So the revenue trend, the earnings per share trend, and the dividend growth trend over the past 5 years. Look at the payout ratio, look at the business model, determine if the company is set to thrive or not, and then rate all your stocks from 1 to 5. This is what we do at DSR. We track over 1,100 stocks, both trading on the US and Canadian market. So we have a pro rating that you see. So a classic sell, buy, and hold rating. And then we have a dividend safety score from 1 to 5. So very easy to understand. Everything above 3 and above is good. So it's going to follow up the inflation or going to increase even more. If you're at 2, chances are you're going to have a problem at one point, or at least don't expect any dividend increase. And if you're at 1, well, there you go. You have dividend trash in your portfolio. And those are the companies, the 1s and the 2s you want to get rid of, and you want to build a better portfolio moving forward. So I hope that you have liked this video. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and go in the comment, tell me what is your #1 trick to avoid dividend cuts. Tell me how it works, and we're going to help investors invest with more conviction with this. So until the next video, don't forget to stay invested.